Man, I'm glad to be with you today. And you have a blue background today instead of your normal office attire.
Yeah, I do. This is my professional appearance background, when we're doing events like this. But
Yeah.
I try and match it to whatever jacket I'm wearing. You know what I mean?
Well, see, I think I must have known that because I wore the jacket that matched today.
You did. Yeah, it looks wonderful. It looks
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Like we had communicated this beforehand. I assure you we didn't.
Well, welcome to the attendees that we have here today. We're going to get started on prioritizing investing and saving for your future and shredding your debt in just one moment. Um, Adam's here with me. I'm Steven. So we'll get started in just a second here. You're in Iowa today?
I am in Iowa today, Phoenix tomorrow. The next week I'll be in Orlando for like 4 or 5 days, and then I come home for a day, and then I fly to back to Phoenix for 3 days, and then to Bozeman, Montana for 4 or 5 days. So it's
Good
going to be
Lord.
September's crazy.
That is a lot. A lot of frequent flyer miles.
Yes, freaking flyer miles, hotel points. Should be a good 20 days or so.
Nice. Well, this is going to make some really good content. We're going to put this up on our website. So I think people want to know, how do I save and plan for my kids' education or plan for
Yeah,
my retirement at the same time, as
totally.
well as like how do I pay down debt? So this is really going to, I think, start some conversations with people, with their business partners or their spouses or even their kids,
Yes,
about how they can really eradicate debt while investing for their future. So
no question.
we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Steven Huskey. I am the owner and founder of Huskey Financial Group, based out of Charleston, South Carolina. I'm actually sitting in the Charlotte, North Carolina office today, why it's not in my usual, skyline of Charleston in the background. I'm also a co-owner of Blue Water Dental Advisors with Brandon Wilson, and we help dental practices protect, grow, and exit their practices. And so I really want to focus on something that I get a lot of questions about: is how do I pay down my student debt? How do I eradicate my home mortgage quicker? How do I make better decisions regarding leveraging debt, using cash, and those types of things? And so I wanted to invite Adam Carroll on with me today. He is the founder of, I think, the Shred Method is what it's called, correct? And you've spent 15 years helping people do more with the money that they make. And so just a little background on Adam: he is an internationally recognized financial literacy expert. He is the author of 4 Amazon bestsellers, a 2-time TED Talk speaker, and you also have 6 million views on that video. So very highly watched. And you're creator of the Broke, Busted, and Disgusted documentary, which aired on CNBC and is shown in hundreds of high schools and colleges across the country. You're also the host of the Build a Bigger Life podcast. You've also been on my Portfolio Pulse podcast. And so, Adam, when you're not speaking at conferences and consulting with companies or hosting leadership retreats in exotic locations, you're going to find him at home shooting hoops or having Nerf wars with his kids. So welcome, man. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Stephen. It's an honor to be here. I'm really excited about the content today because, as you alluded to, I think one of the big questions that people have is, what do I prioritize? Should I save? Should I invest? Should I be paying off my debt? Should I be saving for the future? There's a gigantic question mark for most people around that. And I'm just excited today to kind of chat through strategies and mindset and give people perspective on what they can and or should prioritize.
I agree with that. A lot of this is that you can do a lot of these things at the same time. But I think the reason people don't want to make any adjustments is because it affects their lifestyle. Like, they don't want to go buy fewer of these coffees
Yeah.
at Starbucks, or maybe go out to eat one less time a month or whatever it is. But you don't
Yes.
have to do that. Our job as advisors, you being an advisor on debt and me being an advisor on money, is trying to find creative ways to help our clients and consult these people on saving money on the taxes,
Yeah.
saving money on debt, and then using that extra cash flow wisely. So we'll
No doubt.
get right into it. This shouldn't take longer than a half an hour. There will be a recording for this, so people will get this to their email. Share it with anybody you find would benefit from it, and please ask questions in the chat while I'm doing my presentation. Adam can see, and then vice versa. I'll make sure that we get your questions answered today. So I'm going to share my screen. So I want to bring up a sample client. This is someone who is relatively young. I think they're in their 40s. Yeah, 45 and 46. They've got 3 kids. They are earning $480,000 a year. So this is a typical case for someone who's a pretty high net worth earner. They have to consider, top tax brackets and tiers and things like that. But then also they've leveraged quite a bit of debt and mortgages, and they have some significant taxes to pay on their retirement. So these people have all kinds of different planning considerations they need to make.
Mhm.
But what I would like to talk about today is everything we do from a financial decision process needs to consider cash flow as the number one go back. Like, hey, what do I do about my cash flow? What's going to give me the best return on my money? Those types of things.
Yep.
So in order to describe the importance of someone's earnings, being that it's their greatest asset, and we want to be able to save as much of that as possible and leverage it in the best way, let's get some context for what these earnings mean for this fictional couple. So they're earning $480,000, and if they plan to retire at normal retirement age of 65, let's say when Dana turns 65, that's 20 years left for them to build wealth. So let's put this in here. If these people continue to work at the rate that they are today, with a annual income rate increase of 4%, just hey, my boss is giving me more money every year to keep up with the cost of goods going up, these folks are going to generate almost $14.3 million of wealth. That's going to pay their taxes, it's going to pay for their benefits, help their kids get through school, going to help them fund their retirement, pay down debt. So those dollars have a lot to do for that couple. Well, how do we best serve ourselves with this money that we're generating? How do we best serve others with this money? The number one thing to consider is, since this is such an important piece to our household, how much do I need to save to be a great saver? So on average, Adam, do you know what the average percentage that an American household saves of their gross income annually?
If I had to venture a guess, I'd say probably 3 or 4%, maybe max. It might go up to 12. I read the savings rate hit a high during COVID because no one could spend any money, but I don't know what it is today, Stephen.
Yeah, and they were getting inflation, not inflation, but they're getting, checks from all the Congress and stuff like that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
very, very flush with cash. Normally, 5 to 8%
Okay.
what they save, and that's, sorry, that is including 401k or IRAs. So that's short, mid, and long-term goals, which is pretty nuts. So let's just say that, this client is an average American and they're going to save 5% of their money. So if they're in this bracket, they're probably paying 35 to 37%. Probably 30% of their money is going to debt. And then they want a pretty decent lifestyle. They're going to spend that 30% there. So if this person is generating $14.3 million and they're saving like any average American would, they're going to save over 20 years, $700,000. So Adam, right away, what are some of the inherent challenges you see with this structure?
Well, first of all, you're saving this money to what end would be my first question. So if we're saving $714,000, it's if we're comparing that to inflation, we're losing money. It's a melting ice cube. That would be the first thing I would notice.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, from my perspective, I would question how much is necessary to have sitting liquid versus having available. And we're going to talk about the difference between availability and access.
Yeah.
Because I think some people, they're of the mindset of, I want to have cash on the sidelines because it's available to me all the time. When in actuality, what you might need is just access to that amount of money. So those are the two answers off the top of my head.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, thinking about liquidity, access to this money, using it for your short-term and mid-term goals. Long-term, you can have it locked up a little bit if you're trying to, retire in 20 years. It's a long time horizon.
Yep.
But this does not include any rate of return. This is just how much they actually stuffed away.
Right.
And so, any advice that you're going to receive typically is really fixated on the rate of return of that investment. And so if you're going to try to put all your money into mutual funds or index funds and invest for your future that way, which is fine, and you expect to get a 10% rate of return after taxes, that's net. If you consider that, they have $2 million saved up at that point. My first question, though, is can they replicate 10% every year for 20 years? And then secondly is, do you think this is going to fund their lifestyle and retirement for 20 to 25 years if they're used to living off 400 to 500,000?
That would be a strong no for me, for sure.
Yeah. And a lot of things have to go right for this 10% to come into our lives every single year. So why don't we as planners help our clients understand that instead of focusing on the variables that we can't control, just hoping things work out, why don't we have more control and offer more flexibility to them? So let's try to reduce the amount of risk that they're taking in their portfolio, which is called the reduction of standard deviation inside their portfolio. What if we got them a pretty decent 7% every year, and then we help them focus on eliminating taxes as we could, and then help them eliminate some debt significantly.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're able to prioritize putting away the right amount of money. And as the individual earning these dollars, you can control how much you save. So you're in control in this example. Now you have just shy of $6 million. And if you're investing at 4 or 5% every year, you should be able to replicate with Social Security and maybe any pension that amount of income, or 80% of that lifestyle you enjoyed prior to retirement.
Yes.
So I wanted to just to show people, like, advisors really hold a very big job when they're working with you, and that's to find creative ways so that your lifestyle doesn't change. You go out and live the best life you want today, but then you can also be rest assured that, no guarantees of course, but you're going to have a great lifestyle in retirement, and we help manage those risks along the way. Pretty simple and powerful.
Yeah, I love it. The way I would describe this too, Stephen, when I do a presentation, I'll typically talk about the what, the so what, and the now what. And what you just described is the what is if we're saving a certain amount and we're not paying attention to taxes or debt, it can eat into our ability to save. The so what is, what if you made a couple of these tweaks, like minimizing your tax expenses, minimizing the debt that you're paying for, what's possible. And I think we're getting to now what, which is what are the steps someone takes and how do you get there, right?
Yeah. So how do I best prioritize savings? How do I make it kind of a habit? And in order for you to make a habit, you have to do things continuously, time after time, and then become second nature. So what's the best way to do that? I do want to talk about Uncle Sam and utilities companies. These two organizations have figured out how to get their money from you quickly and without you thinking about it. And if you're a W-2 employee, you know that they can get paid directly before you receive that paycheck. And so we want to implement that same strategy with our own savings. One of the biggest issues that people see when their income starts to increase, as does their lifestyle cost. And so the lifestyle creep sets in.
Yeah.
So if we continue to prioritize saving 15 to 20% of our dollars, we can do it automatically, and we can readjust it annually to make sure that that's happening. So let's talk about the right order of operations for how to save, and then I'll show you how to do it. So most people, Adam, when they receive their paycheck, which is on this part of the cash flow ribbon, the first thing they think about is, like, what am I going to buy my family in terms of groceries? I got to pay my mortgage. I got to pay my utilities bills. So they think about earnings and going directly to lifestyle and the debt.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of doing it the opposite way. And then they're budgeting, they're spending time on a spreadsheet every month, and they're just tweaking it and making sure that it looks good. And then they go to geico.com and they spend 15 minutes on that website so they can save 15% or more on their car insurance.
Yep.
There's no real context as well for what they're protecting. They just want state minimums in place so they don't get a fine.
Right.
So if there's anything left over at the very net, at the bottom of that budget, if there's any disposable income, that's typically what people will save.
Yeah.
Not everyone, but that's typical. So how do we best optimize these dollars? The first thing you should do is understand the wealth building potential, which I just showed you, understand how important your assets are. Number two is because we know that that's the greatest asset. We don't have that $15 million anywhere else on our balance sheet. Let's protect it as best as we can, because we protect our home, we protect our cars, we protect our wedding bands. Why not protect our incomes properly?
Yeah.
Then if we save 20% of that, we got to figure out what is 20% of 480,000. It's roughly 100 grand, roughly, right? For rounding numbers, we'll use that. Then I work with professionals to help lower my debts and taxes, and everything else I can spend guilt-free. I don't have a budget because I can spend everything down to the penny, and I have saved and I've paid everybody else and myself included. So that's the best way to use your money. Earn it, protect it, save it, pay your liabilities so that you don't go to jail and don't lose your house, and then spend the rest on you. Thoughts on that,
Yeah,
Adam?
I'm totally digging this. I mean, it's kind of PEMDA, right? Isn't that PEMDAS? Wasn't
PEMDAS,
that
order of
what we
operations.
learned in elementary math?
Yeah,
It is the order of operations for finances. And one of the things that I think is worth noting, you said work with professionals to limit your tax costs and I think even some liabilities. And this is one of the areas that we personally work with folks on is really helping them understand that the two greatest expenses that they'll have in life are taxes and the interest expense on debt for most people. And so if we can minimize tax costs, which you would do through an advisor and a really talented tax accountant and tax prep person, and then the liabilities around debt repayment, I think most folks, we operate in a banker's business model. And I'm a big believer of this, Stephen, that we go to the bank, we tell them we need to borrow an amount of money for something, be it a house, a car, a boat. The bank tells us how much we owe on a monthly basis and we dutifully pay it. But we never really question, is this the most efficient use of our money? And when you reorient your cash flow, similar to what you're showing here in that ribbon, we can show people how you can minimize what your interest expense on those debts are as well, which may create even more left for lifestyle, within 3 to 5 years.
agreed, totally. I mean,
Yep.
working with someone like yourself, I believe, can help people change their mindset around their money. And paradigm shift is kind of what we like to do here. I hate calling it paradigm shift, but it's just a different change in thinking.
Yeah.
Because we've been drilled so long for, like, even in our culture, that we just go spend what we make. The last thing I want to share is, I promise you, I'll tell you how to properly save and how you can do it effectively to accomplish your short, mid, and long-term goals. Since we've decided that to save 20% of our income, that's roughly going to be $100,000 for this fictional couple. We want to have this not only diversified in the asset class in which we invested, but also the timing of that, which we call dollar cost averaging, and in liquidity. So we have aggressive stocks here. These are mostly going to be going towards non-qualified and qualified, being 401k dollars. You can have a longer time horizon with those. You have stocks that provide dividends as well. So those are great, number one, because you can reinvest those dividends and you can generate more growth in your account. And then when you retire, you can actually take those dividends as part of your income play. You can actually use that, they call it mailbox money. That's the way to do it. And then you've got some more long-term fixed income here. Fixed income is used in a portfolio to provide protection against all of your equity positions. There's a lot of market risk. And so we typically invest in something less aggressive to make sure that we have still some growth in our portfolio during down. So how does that work? $480,000 is generated by us working, goes directly into our household checking account, and like most people, we want to go and pay our expenses. But like Uncle Sam and our utilities companies, we want to create a connection. We want to withdraw either on a monthly or quarterly basis the money that we want to save for our future. So if we did this, like, let's just call it once a year here, right? We pull $100,000, we put that money into something that is accessible, liquid, and is used to funnel money to other areas that are important to you. We call this a wealth building account. And a wealth building account is strictly used for the accumulation of savings dollars to be redeployed to help us accomplish all of the goals that you have provided in conversations to your planner. And so you can start saving for kid education that way. On an annual basis, if you want to start putting money into 529s, you can do that. You can ensure you got cash on hand for new opportunities that present itself, whether it's an investment property or a business, or you just want to go take a vacation. The funds are there. It's less debt that you're taking on as well. You can also use it to pay down debt. That's the goal for a lot of people. And we want this in a separate account from your regular financial institution because it's very easy to borrow from your savings and put that money directly into your checking account, and then poof, you forget about it. You don't pay yourself back. This is going to help you stay more accountable to that. And if you're wondering how that is split up towards the particular assets in your portfolio, on an annual basis, you can invest those dollars this way. So by creating an automatic and a systematic approach to your savings, you will be able to save more money more frequently and without flaw. So that's my portion today. I hope that simple suggestion around your savings and order of operations for your money and understanding the context of the wealth you're going to provide your family helps a lot. So I'll turn it over to you, Adam.
I have a question for you, Stephen. If you don't mind, would you mind resharing that
Sure.
last image? How much of that, in terms of the work you do with your clients, how much of that is automated? So when we say what you save is 100,000, and I know some people are wired for, I have to write a check for 100,000. That could be 33 a month. It could be, $25,000 a quarter. But how much of the automation happens from your perspective?
Pretty much all of it is automated. So, let's just say that this person wants to have all of this bypass the wealth building account and go directly to, 401k, IRAs if they're eligible for them, and then maybe a cash balance plan if they're a business owner, right?
Yep.
They could have it just totally bypassed. So that's an automated thing. Their paychecks are typically automated, and then we'll set up a date per month, usually the 15th or the 30th or whatever they want, where the money's taken from their account and it goes directly to this. That's automated.
Yep.
And we can also set up automatic transfers from the wealth building account to investment. And so they dollar cost average automatically into these different accounts.
Yep.
And they can just live their life. I mean, everything in this generation is basically automated. So it's either subscription or, we stream stuff, it's automatic. We want instant gratification, and this is kind of how we do it with money.
Yeah.
And you have full access and control over it, which is also great.
Yep. I love this.
Thanks.
Yeah, this is great. I want to touch on this a little bit because when we talk about savings, this $100,000 a year from what you've shown, would you consider it straight savings, or is this future investment money?
It depends. I mean, people's lives change a lot. So we could change those three categories from stocks and dividends and fixed income whenever it makes sense. Typically, these dollars are earmarked to be invested, but most of 50,000 of it is going to be non-qualified. So we still have access to it. We just don't want it sitting around in a checking account or a savings account that's not earning them anything.
Right. Yes. And I think that's the situation that I find a lot of clients in that begin working with us is they've got a significant amount of money set aside in a savings account. It's in a money market or a passbook savings. It is there ideally for emergency purposes. But what I'll typically ask them, and we usually get a lot of business owners who will say, well, I have $500,000 sitting here in this account, and I've got 6 months worth of accounts receivable from my client, and so on and so forth. And I'll ask them, why all the cash? Why all the cash? Why is it there? What is it there? What purpose is it serving? And generally speaking, it's like a security blanket for them because they have available funds, right? It's available to them. And my question is typically, what if you had access to it? It wasn't immediately available, but you had access to it and it was actually earning money, which is what it's doing from that wealth building account on to the investments you have listed on the screen. What it points to, I think for most people, is going back in time and looking at what was the message that you heard growing up that said you needed 6 months or a year or 2 years worth of cash sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah.
And does that still serve you? does that information or that script, is that still a reality in your world? Or did that come from what your parents or your grandparents passed down from generation to generation? And now you, a professional, are in a different situation. And so I think you've nailed it, that so long as your income is protected, so you've got disability income protection, and you've got what, call it 3 to 6 months worth of cash should you need it in the sky falls,
Mhm.
and it's there, whether that's available or it's just accessible, you've got it. And then everything else is being used in strategy to either blast away debt, which does what you suggested, it reduces risk, or it's being used to grow wealth, or I should say, and or, because
And
you could be doing both simultaneously.
exactly. It's just
Yeah,
about being smarter with how you use your assets.
right.
I think since the Great Depression, people have been wanting to squirrel away money because it makes them comfortable. It's emotional, right?
Yep, yep,
And advisors like ourselves prevent people from making decisions that are just emotional without actually looking through the full facts. And if it makes sense for you to have 100 grand in savings, go for it. Awesome. As long
yep,
as you can sleep at night. But if you want to be more advantageous with it, let's figure out what we can do. So with that, I'd love to go into the shred method and how that works. And now we know
yeah,
how to save. Let's focus on how to pay down debt.
yeah. You know, I was grabbing screen grabs of what you were showing because I love the way it's illustrated. And
Mhm.
we often use illustrations to show the flow of money through someone's household and how to use the shred method. Um, Candidly, I'm a big believer in a both and scenario. It is not either pay off debt or invest. It is both and simultaneously. And so the way that we teach other folks how to do that is, we suggest that your income actually, as it funnels through the home, for most people, what it does is it goes right into checking, and then they pay all their bills out of checking. They pay their mortgage, they pay their utilities, car loans, student loans, credit cards, living expenses, and anything extra would either go to savings or maybe it goes to investments. For the majority of Americans out there, it goes to Costco, Target, and dining out is where it goes. Um, and my joke here is my wife says I'm the only guy who can walk into Costco with a shopping list and walk out with a kayak, because it happened once. It just happened once, but she never lets me live it down. And I wasn't the only idiot in line. There were like 3 other kayak shoppers in the store.
Must have been a good
Uh,
deal.
it was a good deal. It was $400. I thought, what the heck? Let's do
Yeah.
it. Um, so what we teach people to do is instead of money being deposited into checking, we're actually going to deposit all of our income, excuse me, into a line of credit, and specifically a home equity line of credit. And we do this for a couple reasons. Number one, if the money is just sitting in savings or checking even for a period of time, and I think we can all relate to this, Stephen, that you get paid and then your money sits in checking and it dwindles over the
Yep.
course of a 2-week period as you swipe your debit card at Costco and Target and dining out. And we feel really good when it's flush. And then as we're getting closer to payday, we're like, thank goodness payday's on Friday. Now, some people may have flushness all the time. They may have copious amounts of money sitting in savings or checking. But my question is, why? Why do that? What if you are carrying debt and you've got that money, what if you could own more of your income? And the way we do that is by funneling our income through the home equity line. We have a piece of software that will actually tell you where that money should go to get the most bang for your buck in terms of return. That may be investing, that may be blasting away your debt.
Mhm.
And what we're doing effectively is we're accelerating the amortization table on all of your compound interest debts. So if you think about your mortgage, most people will be in a mortgage for 5 to 7 years, and they may even refinance once or twice in those 5 to 7 years. But every time they do that, they reset the clock back to zero
Yep.
and they begin paying interest all over again, where 90% of their payments interest laden, 10% goes to principal. We're showing them how lump sum payments from time to time can accelerate you from payment 1 or 2 to payment 28 or payment 58 or payment 72. So when you skip, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years of payments, that is real interest that you're saving, as well as more and more of your monthly payment is being contributed to principal, not to padding the banker's pocketbook and paying interest. So I'll pause there.
Yeah. Question for you on that is, how are you funneling this money to a home equity line of credit? What does that mean exactly? Can you be more descriptive? And then also, is it just a revolving line that or a revolving balance that's being used to pay off, debt, fund your lifestyle, save, all those things?
It is. The simple answer to that is when I say funnel it through the HELOC, your direct deposit may go into checking, but we move it immediately into the home equity line of credit. And because a home equity line of credit can never be positive, you can never have a surplus or a positive balance in a HELOC. It always has to be negative or zero, that we have to deploy some of that money out of that HELOC somewhere. And it would make sense to either do it into an investment or into a debt repayment. And so what we can do fundamentally is show people how if you were functioning within this flow of money in your household economy, you could be out of debt completely, mortgage, cars, the whole 9 yards, in somewhere between 3 and 7 years for most people, and not change your lifestyle one iota, including not really changing how much you're investing. Because if you're dollar cost averaging into the investments you showed on a previous screen, 100 grand going to stocks and bonds, going to, other investments, you can still do that. And we can actually show in our software where the delta is, what makes sense to continue investing versus to blast away debt.
So the true cost of the decisions that you're doing.
That's right.
Or
That's
gain.
right. That's right.
Got it.
And this is key because you alluded to this, that when you reduce the amount of taxes that you pay and you reduce the amount of interest that you're paying on debt, you can achieve that $5 million level or whatever it is that would allow you to retire comfortably. And most people would say, but it's the cheapest money I'll ever have. I'll never pay off my mortgage. And there are times where I would say, hey, agree with you. It is really cheap money. But what if your 3.5% mortgage, I could show you how an effective APR is actually 0.5. And when you do that and you knock it out in 6 years, let's say, that's 24 years ostensibly that you would not pay interest. That is more wealth building years for you to contribute to, either lifestyle cost or creating a more wealthy future for you and your future generations.
That's a good point. Let's just say your principal and interest every month is $2,000. That's $24,000 you have back that you can then invest.
That's right.
And with compound interest and those types of things, it's just astronomical.
That's right. And this is where I love dealing with guys like you, because you get it. You get both sides. You get the idea that this is a strategy for us to both grow our wealth, but also reduce risk by paying off some of our debt, deleveraging a little bit.
Yep.
And to give you hard numbers, we live in it's probably worth, if you trust Zillow, it's probably worth $600,000, the 5,000 square foot home in West Des Moines. And at one point, my payment was close to $2,000. And out of that $2,000, about 300 of it went to principal and the rest went to interest. So that meant that $1,700 a month was going out the door and going to my lender. And we have gamed the system, so to speak. We have used the shred method to such an extent that our payment on this house is now $850 a month. And of that 850, where are we at right now? $725 a month goes to principal. So
wow.
When I talk about owning more of our income, that's what I mean. How much of the income that you make is actually going to build your own wealth versus going to pay for either interest on debt or taxes. And the more you have held back, right, the more that you make, that you are able to keep of what you make, the more strategies you can employ, a gentleman like you could employ on minimizing tax liability by maybe overfunding, pre-tax investments or doing strategic things with real estate. That's ultimately our goal, is to begin stacking these strategies one on top of the other to get the best benefit.
Poignant stuff. I appreciate that. Let me ask you a question that just popped in my head. I remember back in 2009, 2008, people were having their loans called immediately.
Yeah.
And they were having their home equity lines frozen from use.
Yep.
If that were to happen again, what would the people who are using this method do?
So there's two reasons why the folks who use the shred method, we believe, are sheltered from that. Number one, they are actively paying down the equity in their home or the principal of their home, creating equity.
Mhm.
And the reason that those loans were either frozen or called due was they had gone out over their skis. And so there were audits that were being done on these homes that said, not only is this home not worth what the appraisal said it was worth, but you've now loaned them an extra $100,000 on a line of credit that they've now leveraged. So they're not just out over their skis, they are way out over their skis on this place. So we need to halt it and we need to call the loan right away. Our users are doing this, their income funnels through that HELOC. So it's always a performing loan for the bank because it's the payment is being made month after month and the balance goes up when we borrow and it goes down when we pay it back.
Mhm.
And so long as it's trending down, most lenders don't really care because it's a performing asset for them. And it's important to note that loans are a bank's asset. So when I say it's a performing asset, the loan is an asset to the bank and it's
Correct.
performing when you're paying on it.
Mhm.
And then on the principal side of the home, so long as you're making lump sum payments into the principal debt that you owe against the house, the mortgage, there is more and more equity that's being created month after month after month. So the theory, in theory, if someone is using this well, they would never be out over their skis. They'd never be underwater. It would have to be a really dramatic, like cut 50% values. And I just don't think that's going to happen given
Good
the
to know.
situation we're in real estate wise.
Okay. I just try to look at pros and cons of both
Yeah, no,
sides
I
and
love it.
figure out what could happen.
I
Um,
will say this, we are constantly evaluating interest rate environments. And many of our members have said, hey, what happens when my HELOC interest rate, if they're on a variable rate, goes to 6.5 or 7 or 8%? And we have measures and levers that we can pull within our software that will say, hey, when we get to this level of an interest rate, we're going to back down the limit or the balance that we're showing available on the line of credit so that we're not spending too much in interest on the HELOC. It's got to be the savings has to be commensurate on the mortgage side. But candidly, Stephen, we've done this calculation up to 9, even 10% on a 3 or 4% mortgage, and it still makes sense. It's really about we're playing interest rate arbitrage, and we're borrowing short bursts of money at whatever interest rate it is, and leveraging that against a massive sum of money on a long-term amortization schedule. And when we lop off huge chunks of that amortization schedule, we save tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for most people in interest.
well, let's talk about too, if people are interested in getting a home equity line, how that works. So I want to
Yeah.
use simple math here. Let's say someone owns a $500,000 house.
Yep.
Most banks will lend up to 80 to sometimes 85% of the value of the home. So if
Correct.
you take 500,000 and then you multiply that times 80, you can use $400,000 of your equity.
Yep.
Then they want to subtract any liens against the property. So let's say you have a $300,000 mortgage. You now can go get a home equity line for $100,000.
That's right. Yep.
So if you were wondering how much equity can I use, think about take your home value, what it would be appraised for, multiply it times 80 and subtract your mortgage.
Yep.
And that's how much you can get up to that amount. So
That's right.
where should a person who's interested in a home equity line go if they don't already have one? And also the second part of that question is, how much of a line of credit should they have? What should the limit be?
Yeah. Both great questions. The where to go would be from a logistically simple standpoint, go to where you have your primary checking. So if you're at a local bank or credit union, great. If you're at a US bank or Bank of America type institution, they are becoming less and less willing to do HELOCs on the coasts of the country. So you're better off if you're living on one of the coasts to probably go to a local bank or credit union and ask for a HELOC. And again, from a logistically simple standpoint, it's good to have a checking account there because you're going to want someplace to direct deposit into, right? So your paycheck goes somewhere and then it gets kicked over to the HELOC.
Yep.
but any bank or credit union is going to do these, Stephen. Um, and they're all going to be a little, there may be some nuance to them. They're all going to be a little bit different. So some may have an interest only payment. Some may require you to pay 1% of the balance on a monthly basis. And it really doesn't matter. There are ways that we can do this in a more efficient manner. But so long as you have a HELOC, that's really the key. And my question to everyone out there that ever hears this recording, those of you on and those of you who will hear it later, is if you don't have a HELOC right now, why don't you? Because it costs you nothing if you've not borrowed against it. And it's there for you in times of emergency. So if we had a hailstorm not too long ago, hailstorm rolls through, hopefully, ideally, insurance would cover it. But what if they don't cover some crazy expense and you have a $10,000 bill you have to pay? Then where would that money come from? For some people, it would either come straight out of savings. They might have to go get a loan from a lender. And what we're saying is you have this HELOC available, just leverage it. As
Exactly.
far as how much to have, this is a good question. From our methodology, you want to have at least 1.5 times whatever your monthly recurring income is. So your take-home pay. So if you're making $10,000 a month, you would want at least $15,000 on your HELOC. If you're making 50,000, you need 75,000.
Okay.
But here's what I would say on that as a disclaimer. Get as much as you can, because it is just another liquidity pool for you. It's a source of funds should you need them. And the reason that I say that is when you start investing in $50,000 and $100,000 chunks, the investments that become open and available to you are way different. You go from being a retail investor to being a wholesale investor, and you're doing things like syndications or intellectual property plays. Maybe you're investing in a business. You're doing different things. And I have to be really mindful, as do you and your clients, about taking a calculated risk versus being risky with that money, because everything we do is a calculated risk. We're trying to mitigate all that risk and reduce the risk as much as possible. But when you have that amount of money, the investments just change.
Well, I consider using equity in your home, like doing something advantageous with that cash, because you're building up
Yes.
this value, but
Right.
you're not using it.
Right.
And it's also not liquid unless you can use the equity. So if you don't have, a ton of cash on hand, having home equity is great. If you want to use the shred method, it's an excellent tool.
Yep.
I would have you consider to go get one if you find that this would be helpful for you.
Yes.
So what's the website these folks can go check out to learn more about you and the shred method?
Yeah, very simply, if you go to theshredmethod.com, we have an evergreen webinar, which you can watch. It's about 25 minutes. It'll go into the nuts and bolts of this. And then there's a number of articles and Q&As and things like that for you to get even more deeply down the rabbit hole, if you will, of this strategy. I'll say this, Stephen, going to theshredmethod.com, learning this methodology for me, I've been doing this for about 10 years, and it has allowed me to pay off my home twice in that amount of time. Fortunately for me, I've been in the same house. We love this house. We'll be here for a long time. But every time I pay it off, I go, okay, well, if rates dip again, I'm going to redeploy. I'm going to go do a cash out refi and redeploy a significant amount in cash flow producing assets or in the market if the timing is right. And I know that because I'm going to use shred on the back end, I'm only going to have this mortgage for maybe 2.5 or 3 years before it's all gone again. The analogy or metaphor that I would give people is this: airplanes are not meant to sit on the tarmac. They really aren't. If an airplane sat on a tarmac for weeks or months on end, even days on end, at some level, they're going to become decrepit, right? They're not going to be useful. They have to be re-engineered and maintained. Ships are not meant to just sit in the harbor. They're meant to be out on the open sea. Money, there is something about the velocity of money that if it is just sitting idly in a savings account or a checking account for an extended period of time, it is actually detrimental to your wealth building because that money has no velocity.
Exactly right.
And so we can either use that velocity of money to reduce debt, or we can use it to increase wealth. Either way, we're gaining, right? We're reducing risk, we're building wealth on the back end. But we got to be doing something. So
Mhm.
if you're stuck in that status quo bias, right, which is when presented with the option of doing something or doing nothing, most people will do nothing. Force yourself to do something with it. And whether that's working with Steven or working with a group like us about strategizing how to do this well, I think that's key is, if you've sat long enough going, I should be doing something, I just don't know what, let us help identify the what and then help you take action towards it.
Man, it's been great having you on. You have a lot of little snippets of great knowledge. And so glad that you could join us today. I'm going to put my information in the chat box for anybody who wants it. And then Adam, you should do the same. We'll stay out for a couple more minutes. If anybody has any questions about planning or how to pay down debt properly, or you just want to ask Adam where he got his jacket, whatever you guys want to do. And thank you again for joining us, all the attendees and you as well, Adam.
Yeah, my pleasure, Stephen. I have to appreciate you for setting this up and being the professional that you are and how you present the information. Because I think the bottom line for both of us is this is really about education. It's not
Yeah,
about,
absolutely.
there are some folks out there that really are about selling product or the bottom line or AUM or whatever it may be. And for me, I built my career on educating folks because I think we're in dire need of that in our society. There's a lot of folks that just kind of go blindly into retirement or their finances, not really knowing what to do or how to do it. And the more educated we can help folks be, I think the better off their families will be. And one last comment I'll make on that is I read somewhere that it takes 2 generations to create a Rockefeller type fortune.
That's it.
And the question that I always pose to my clients is, are you generation 1 or are you generation 2? And if you're fortunate enough to be generation 2, man, thank your lucky stars and your parents that they did the right thing. But if you're generation 1, like, let's get started.
Excellent point. Yeah, and I mean, using that wealth and not just spending it down, but actually generating more wealth on top of that is paramount. It's a great way to consider things. Yeah, I mean, it's all about education. It's giving back. I wanted an outlet, and so I think doing something like this just allows me to, share my thoughts, share my considerations, bring people like yourself on. We don't do this alone. Like we want people to learn and take that with them. There's a lot of garbage out there. I kind
Yes.
of wanted to sell the myth, and so I'm glad and fortunate to have met you and shared some good education today.
Right on, Stephen. Thank you.
Awesome, guys. Well, hey, this will be recorded. I'm gonna send it out to everybody. Probably get that in a few days. Adam, thanks again, man.
Thanks, Stephen. Talk soon.